Immaculate, the Big 12 has bought into the settlement. And this settlement is, if not gone through, the NCAA could owe $20+ billion tomorrow. And that probably wouldn't be a very good thing for the NCAA. So settling for $2.7 billion seems to be the future. And what this creates, from my perspective, is something that ESPN has mentioned, this autonomous, and they haven't said it directly, but everybody's got these underlying murmurs that you have put together in the phrase autonomous conferences, meaning the Big Ten, the SEC, namely, can start to make their own rules. The Power Five from now on can say, we want to move forward with this and do this, almost exempt from the NCAA's grasp. Is that where we're going?
Well, to clarify on that, that actually exists already. There's already the autonomous conferences, which were formed in 2014. It's also when the CFP was formed. And when Northwestern case happened. But anyways, that was another big year. But that exists. It's just it exists in a very limited fashion. It's basically over them being able to give some extra money to students. It started back then. It was a fight over, you might remember, like the $2,000 stipends that they wanted to give students. It's actually upwards from now like $3,500 to $5,000. But that's all it can do right now. But it's a very streamlined system. The autonomous conferences, there's each school has a member, and then the conference has 3 votes in it basically, and they put in student athletes in there so that they have a voice. So there's 3 for each conference and then 1 for each school, and they vote on these things for rules that are within their purview. What I'm suggesting is that that's probably where they go and just expand their governance to full or near full governance, since we're now finding out that that's being slipped in with this settlement offers governance.
This is, in my opinion, almost a redefinition of what autonomous conference is. Then it meant, yes, to a limit, but now it becomes, hey, true autonomy in what you want to do as a league. And Charlie Baker mentioned now, 6 months ago, that what if in the future the SEC and the Big Ten, this elite level of college schools, could make their own decisions in NIL and how they wanted to treat their athletes. Do you believe that's where we're going, where the NCAA almost becomes irrelevant in the top decision making from these power leagues?
Yes and no. To me, the autonomous conferences system is probably the best of both worlds. I know a lot of people say, why don't they just leave the NCAA? It's irrelevant. Well, if you go in and you look at the NCAA rule books and guidebooks and everything they do, and hundreds of pages that it is, there's a lot of stuff that those conferences probably don't want to deal with. Yeah. And so this allows them to focus on the stuff that they do want to deal with without having to go through committees and all these other groups that have members of schools on them that are not part of this. Division I now has its own ruling council, but some of that is FCS. So the autonomous conferences, which is now becoming an A4, not an A5. Big 12, they have a say on that. The ACC has a say on that. So it's not just the Big 10 and the SEC. It's all formed together. So however many members you have, guess what? Now that gives you a number of votes. So if a conference becomes much larger than everyone else, technically you're going to have more votes on that board. So go ahead.
And that I don't mean to stop you there, but I do mean to stop you there, because I think everybody's immediately going to turn to, wait a second, did you just say the Big 12 should add as many member schools as possible?
It's not that simple. You still have to pay for them all. You still got to. There's a lot of problems with that. But if they can figure that out, Big 12 pays half to its schools. It might be easier to actually get larger. Technically, if it becomes that big of a deal, and we may be finding out soon, having a slight voting advantage on there might be helpful.
That goes back to a Bill Connolly radio show a couple of weeks ago where he said the Big 12 will go to 32 before anybody else does. And I was like, all right there, Bill, slow the roll there. I go a little bit extreme there, going a little expansion happy. Immaculate, when it comes to that $20 million number, let's camp out there for a bit. I don't know if Iowa State currently can dole out $20 million, and that has been the rhetoric from their athletic director, who has cut spending for advancements in facilities. He said, look, we can't, we got to stop these projects for the thought we might have to pay $20 million to our student athletes directly. Is that where this settlement's going to take us? And it seems like that is the case. And can every school in the current Power Four pay for it? And if you can't pay for it, do you just go away?
What I think matters more than a specific number like that is a percentage. There's going to be a percentage ascribed of how much you bring in has to go towards that. So technically in the Big 12, that could be a lower amount than what it is in the SEC or the Big 10. So if a school decides to just go with whatever that minimum is, they could be paying out less. So, you're thinking, we'll never get the right students. Well, you're still paying them, and they still want the opportunity to actually start on a team and play and be seen. So you'll still have opportunities to do that, but you might be able to do it at a lower cost. And I think what we're seeing, especially because the lead counsel for the plaintiffs has said, is conferences are going to be able to determine some of their own rules going forward. Now, he's just a lawyer on the plaintiffs, but I'm sure he probably kind of knows where the settlement's going. So you guys would be able to determine some of that on your own, and maybe the amount that you guys do is a little bit less.
Yeah.
And so it's a little more feasible.
Let's say, and again, I think the general person listening to the show then thinks, all right, well, if the SEC is giving out $21 million a year, each school to its student athletes, and the Big 12 is giving out $14 million, we'll say, then at that point, the disparity in quality of athlete goes from the gap it already is to an even wider one. Does that, in essence, put the Big 12 completely out of the picture from a competitive standpoint with the Power 2 that many have dubbed it?
Best answer I can give on that is I don't know. We're going to have
That's probably the nice answer. That's the nice answer.
And I would like to say that no, it's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
Because it comes down to you're going to have to figure out some ways to be competitive in raising funds.
Yeah.
Also, like I said, this also comes down to opportunities. They're talking about limiting roster spaces for football. So that might go down. They might not have walk-ons anymore. Right. So some of these guys who maybe would get on to another program at some of these schools, they're only going to have a limited number of spots. So you're still going to get guys. You're still going to, and that comes down then to coaching and putting the team out there. And also in the Big 12, you're going to have a gauntlet throughout the entire year.
I think so.
Anyone who's ever played before, the best way to make guys better is have tough games for them.
Yep.
So you might be surprised at what you can do by paying folks a little bit less, but having, just an across the board, highly competitive league.
You didn't break my spirits like you could have there. There is, and with the roster consolidation, the kid who would have been a 4-star backup for 2 years in an SEC school who thinks he can start right away at Texas Tech might choose the Big 12. Yep. And that, in essence, and maybe Big 12 schools put more focus on NIL than the SEC, who might dial back on collectives. That's the hope, at the very least, to keep the Big 12 where it is. Let's take you for, at least now, to the East Coast, where the ACC and Florida State, it seems like the Noles are even more active today, especially behind the scenes, on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is where I go all of the time, to try to win just a little bit of money. The first of the month's coming up, and I think, I'm just going to go to the NBA, and there's a game going on between the Dallas Mavericks and whoever the Dallas Mavericks are playing, the Timberwolves maybe. Well, FanDuel, there, I can say, hey, guess what? Of these 7 games, I think the Mavericks are going to win in 6, and I put $20 on it. If it hits, I get $75, and $75 is good. If it doesn't hit, I lose that $20, but guess what? If it does hit and I win that $20, I also win $150 in free play. That's right. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet, much less $20. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, and player props and more. FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com today and bet on the Dallas Mavericks, or if you don't want to, the Timberwolves from Minnesota, if that suits your fancy. For $5, if you hit, you get $150 in bonus bets on FanDuel.com/locked on.